Please welcome to stage a veteran of this stage, Steve LeCombe!
Okay, thank you. If you've been to Science Showoff before, or spent about 30 seconds talking to Steve, you will definitely be familiar with the naked mole rat. And I'm going to try and convince you in the next 9 minutes that they are, first of all, world-class mathematicians.
Yes!
Of course. And secondly, have important contributions to make to medical science. Yeah. I'm impressed you agreed quite so quickly. Thank you. Right. That's not why people first got interested in African mole rats, though. They first got interested in them because some species, like, that's especially for you, Steve, the naked mole rat, in a picture taken by Lorna Fox, who's going to crop up in a moment, basically think they're social insects, and they will live in colonies. See, I've got 9 minutes starting now. That's much better. Excellent. They basically live in colonies of up to 300 with a single breeding queen. Other species, on the other hand, live in groups of 8 to 20, and others are basically, like many of the presenters tonight, solitary and only come together to mate. And that not terribly frequent. So, why? Why would you do this? In evolutionary terms, giving up reproduction is clearly an odd thing to do. And we think the answer is to do with patterns of food and patterns of weather. And this is something called the aridity food distribution hypothesis. And in particular, we're looking at two types of landscape. We're looking at nice, mesic landscape on the left with plenty of rain, and dry, arid desert landscape on the right. In the mesic environment, food is basically everywhere, quite evenly distributed. Rainfall is quite frequent and quite predictable. And that's really different in the arid environment, where huge areas of land don't have any food at all. When you do find it, you might find it in big clumps, but you might not find it. Rainfall, in fact, is really infrequent, and you can go a couple of years without any rain, okay? And that's a big problem if you're a mole rat, because the way mole rats look for food is they dig foraging tunnels. And in the arid environments, it could be 2 years before you can actually even look for food. You might only be able to look for food for a month or so, and because of the distribution of food, you might well not find it, and you'll all starve to death. You were a bit slow on that one, but thanks. Right, the way you can avoid that in the arid environment is to have a lot of mole rats digging, okay? Because then, in that one period of a few weeks where you actually can look for food, you can dig a lot of tunnels. And the patchy nature of the food means that if you find some, you've probably found enough for everyone. So what we find is in the dry, arid environments, you can't afford to be solitary, so you have to be social or eusocial. On the other hand, in the mesic environments, you can survive quite well on your own, so you don't have to give up reproduction, and we don't find the eusocial species. So what do these burrows look like? Well, somewhat earlier than she took the photo. This is a diagram of a mole rat burrow. It illustrates a number of important features, not least the food stores. At the top, my colleague Chris Fox, sitting over there, who's Lorna's dad, desperately trying to find some mole rats and failing. Chris quite literally wrote the book on African mole rats. You can see one of the mole rats is reading Chris's book down here and nodding off. A slightly more traditional view of the burrows, if you go and dig them up, is they look something like this. So these are two common mole rat burrows from the mesic environment on the left and the arid environment on the right. And actually, these can be quite substantial structures. Some burrows of the naked mole rats can cover 3 kilometres of tunnels, okay? Which brings us neatly to Benoit Mandelbrot. Now, obviously it brings us to Benoit Mandelbrot. As many of you know, he pioneered the study of fractal geometry and the idea of fractional or fractal dimensions, so lots of pretty pictures and stuff. But what is fractal dimension and how are we going to measure it? Well, if I'm trying to impress people, I usually refer to it as Hausdorff-Besicovitch dimension, because that sounds utterly fantastic. But sadly, the alternative name for it is the box counting dimension. And it does come down to counting tens of thousands of boxes. Right, so what we've got here is a line, a very stylized burrow, and a plane. And all we're going to do is count boxes. We're going to put boxes over them such that they cover the whole structure and say, how many boxes do we need? Well, we need 1 box to cover the line, 1 box to cover the burrow, 1 box to cover the plane. We halve the linear dimensions of the box. Incidentally, it took me 20 minutes to rebuild this at the start of the gig when Steve's computer totally fucked it up. We now need 2 to cover the line, 4 to cover the burrow, 4 to cover the plane. We halve it again. We need 4, 12, and 16. And again, we need 8, 26, and 64. So we plot all this on a graph, and because we're mathematicians, we do it on a log scale, and because we're statisticians, we fit lines to it. And lo and behold, we find that the line, which is after all a one-dimensional structure, has a slope of 1. The plane, which is a two-dimensional structure, has a slope of 2. And the burrow has a slope of 1.57, so we say it has a fractal dimension of 1.57. We can do this for the burrows. The one on the left comes out at 1.49. The one on the right comes out at 1.27. It's basically closer to being a line than the one on the left. But why would mole rats care about this? I hear you ask. With or without the sound effects, I hear you ask. And it's because burrows with high fractal dimension are better at finding food. So here's 3 clumps of food in our environment. Now, if you just dig in a straight line, you can easily miss all of those, and yet again, I hope you're ready for the awe, yet again you will starve to death. Thank you. On the other hand, if you dig something with the same total tunnel length but a higher fractal dimension, it's actually much harder to miss all of the food items. This one's found 2, that one's found 2, that one has missed, that one's found 1. So burrows with high fractal dimension are more likely to find clumpily distributed food. So we get to 2 predictions. 1, if we control for the number of animals doing the digging, we expect arid environments to have burrows with lower fractal dimension than the nice mesic environment, because in the nice mesic environment you can dig much more effectively. And if you count hundreds of burrows and literally hundreds of thousands of boxes, the answer is yes. So that's all very nice. Second prediction, if you control for habitat type, so here we're in the arid habitat, if you increase the number of animals foraging, you expect the burrow fractal dimension to go up. Again, you count hundreds of thousands of squares, and again it does. Now, this is the bit that really upset Sarah when I mentioned the talk also included skull trauma, and she got very hurt and worried, and then I said, no, it's okay, it's humans. And she was, oh, yeah, okay, cool, yeah. Don't care about them. There, incidentally, is a paper Chris and I wrote without any cartoons in it at all, just to prove this is real science. But this is the skull trauma bit. This is a CT scan of my friend and colleague, Rue Rose, and if you look carefully, those of you with medical training will notice that the teeth should not be up in the nasal cavity. And the jaw should, in an ideal world, be in 1 bit instead of 3, because just over a year ago, Rue came off a bike and went face first into a van. There she is tweeting after 5 hours of reconstructive surgery, 8 teeth re-implanted in the sockets by my colleague at the Royal London, Simon Holmes. And Rue is a proper scientist, because in her pants, being prepped for the operation by, she says, the very handsome doctor, she was nagging them into getting in touch with me so that we could actually model this. Because the good news is, Londoners, it's way better than Kent for this, London is the skull trauma capital of the world, okay? There you go. In New York, everyone gets shot. Scientifically, it's extremely tedious. In London, we get hit with things. We get hit with baseball bats, we get hit with knuckle dusters, we get hit with cars, we get dropped out of first floor windows on our heads, and in one particularly memorable case, we get held down on the ground and have paving slabs dropped on our face when a drug deal goes wrong. Which is great news because we have good sample sizes. Right, what we're looking at down here is we're looking down on the top of the skull with the face at the top of the screen, and a whole bunch of data combined together looking at the effect of anterior blows on the left in red and lateral blows in blue on the right. Now, if we look at just one, you can see these shapes look actually remarkably similar to the kind of thing we were measuring with the burrows, and we do exactly the same thing. And in this case, the one on the left has a fractal dimension of 1.48, the one on the right 1.16, which is utterly fascinating because we know that actually lateral blows to the skull are much more serious, much more likely to have major complications, worse scores on the Glasgow Coma Scale, and more permanent brain injury. So what's going on? What I think is going on is all the bones in the front of the face, the sutures and the sinuses, are acting like a crumple zone. So you know cars are designed so that if you get in a shunt, the front and the back of the car disintegrate, absorb the energy of the impact, and protect everything in the passenger space. Here's Rue again. This is more recent. Simon really did do a fantastic job rebuilding her. She's back at work. Everything is fine. Mainly because the takeaway lesson for this is if you're going to get hit hard in the head with something, try and absorb the impact with your face. There's the crumple zone, and there's the safety cage. That's it for me. Thank you very much indeed.